Guesstimating.
Oh,
What the fuck is guesstimating? And why should you even do it? And what should you even expect? I mean, guesstimating, ugh, this is why Fit Foodies was created, like
yep. This is
realistically.
how it all began.
This is how it all began.
Yep.
But first, what the fuck is guesstimating?
Uh-oh.
How did it begin? Why? Well, let's first talk about what the hell guesstimation is. It's an approximation for a particular food without nutrition facts.
So this is what you do when something doesn't have nutrition facts,
Yeah,
right?
you like how many places do you go and it's like, oh, this is great, but like, and then you look, you're like, damn it, there's no nutrition facts. Like, what do I do? How do I account for
Yeah.
this?
If you look at something, you're like, how would I even track that?
Yeah.
Boom.
Yep, this is what it does. And so like why would you even do that? Well, there's a couple scenarios right there, right? But asking yourself the question of like why do you measure and track your intake? Well, it helps you understand the insights of what's actually in your food.
Yep.
You do it so that you can learn. You learn, how many calories is in your food, how many macronutrients, or like what are the macronutrients, what are the nutrients in general. Um, but it allows you to decide how you want to spend your calories, right?
So this helps you to remove the good, bad labels, or thinking that you can't or shouldn't be eating something.
Yeah, because when we know how many calories we're working with, then it allows us to know, okay, these are the foods that I want to consume to hit this particular calories to achieve this particular goal, right? That's
Yep.
why we measure and track.
Gives you the freedom.
Yep.
Yep.
So increases your food flexibility and your freedom as well, because you now know like what is in the foods that you are eating, right? And asking yourself the question of like, how often do you eat any of this? Like realistically, how often do you go and eat one of these bao buns with a soft shell crab, deep fried soft shell crab? That was actually amazing.
Yeah. Some of you are probably like, I would never eat that.
I know, I know, I know, I know.
But so like play it safer with that's actually someone probably wouldn't be like, I don't know about that either, because that's a mushroom sandwich. So it's a fried mushroom, so like a vegan fried chicken sandwich.
We're all spectrums here,
Yeah,
okay?
but all right, chicken sandwich, crazy burger, deep dish pizza, bacon wrapped burrito.
Even sushi. Let's be real. Like most Japanese restaurants that you go to or places, they're like, I don't know what to do. It's a crazy sushi roll. I'm just going to eat it, right?
Yep.
And so because of that, because you either A, don't allow yourself to eat these foods often, and then when you do eat them, then you tend to overconsume them because then it's like, well, when am I ever going to eat this food? I'll just do it now. And yeah, then you can't measure and track it often, right?
Yep.
So guesstimating can help you eat more of these foods if you want, right?
Yep. They don't have to be a cheat, something that you can do on a regular
Yeah.
basis, because now you know how to account for them to some degree so you can work them in.
Yeah, because it's up to you to decide if you want to eat them, how often you want to eat them, and to like what quantity you want to eat them, because now you know the amount of calories that they could possibly hold.
Yeah. And most people that track, if they don't guesstimate, then it's like, oh, well, like I'm going to go out and I'm going to have something that's hard to track. Or I don't know how to track. So it's just going to be a cheat, or I
Yep.
need a break or whatever. And then they struggle to make progress. And this
Yep.
is what's going to make you different and set you apart. Is that when you do go out and have those crazy things, you're able to work them in, and it's still a part of the plan.
Yep. So let's talk about managing expectations with guesstimating. Okay, well, a couple things to think about. So guesstimating, it's an educated, logical guess based on the research that you've done. So like you are literally guessing logically and educatedly how many calories you believe something to hold, right? And so with that, sometimes you're going to be like spot on. And it's kind of like when you go and you put something on the scale, you're like, this is how many grams it is. You put it on there, you're like, bam, spot on, exactly 42 grams or whatever.
Ringing up groceries, and it's going to cost this much. You nail it. Or
Yeah.
you get out of bed and you're like, I feel like I'm going to weigh this much. You step on the
Yep.
scale, you're like, oh, it's going to be a good
There it
thing.
is.
Nailed
Yep.
it.
There it is.
But with all of this, like it starts with having some form of reference, right? And so it's like when you first go out, it's like, I don't really know, but you've probably had something that had nutrition facts that was close to it, or you could use as building blocks to be able to, all right, like this is a reasonable guess. And that's where it's like it's an educated,
Yep.
logical guess. You're not just pulling these things out of thin air. It's like something to reference and say, all right, like what is this like? How close can I get to the thing that I'm about to eat so I can formulate my guesstimation?
Yep. And so once again, sometimes you'll be spot on. Sometimes you might be a little or drastically over on the calories that you estimated. Like you go to the restaurant and you thought it was going to be 1,000 calories, and you're like, "There's no way this is 1,000 calories. This is like 300 calories." Or maybe you go somewhere and you only guesstimated that it was going to be 500, and it's like, "This is like 2,000 calories. Like, get out of here." And then even like when you do have the nutrition facts, like there's going to be different chefs that are going to have, heavy hands or light hands. You go to Chipotle, they tell you like, this is the traditional serving sizes, but we'll typically say like, when you go there, I swear they always tend to put more beans and rice than they do protein. So I don't know. I would love to like take my scale and be like, put it on there. Let's
I've
compare.
seen some YouTube videos of people doing that.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh.
but it's very similar. Like even if it's not Chipotle, you've probably been to a restaurant. It's like, oh, like the first time I came here was just so good, or this is just a little bit different. And the reality is because like someone in the back was probably a little bit more generous or a little bit more stingy with some of the ingredients. Or it's like, this was like, I'm gonna make it good for you.
Yeah.
That means a little bit more
Extra
love and
butter.
yeah.
For sure. Oh, let me give him a little some more whipped cream. Extra whipped cream plays on my dessert. But like, why does this even matter? So like, why does it matter if you're over, you're under, you're spot on in your guesstimations? Well, because when you are measuring and tracking, the things that you are doing and you're using the lifestyle tracker, you're going to be like, oh man, so I'm at maintenance targets and I am hitting my targets spot on. Look at this. Like I hit my macros to the gram, or my protein and calories to exactly where I wanted to. But I feel like I'm getting a little chunky. Like what's going on? Like what's actually happening? And so, yes, there can be water retention. There can definitely be water retention. So we'll cover this first. You are going to be eating new foods. There is going to be more sodium when you go out, typically. And so you could be holding on to more water. That is totally a possibility. And with that, if you are holding on to more water, a couple things that you want to monitor is like, are you returning to your baseline? So like, let's say you average like, an average weight of 150 pounds a week, and then you go out to eat, and then you notice like a spike of like 155 pounds. So your average weight is a little bit like maybe like 151 or whatever. So it's a little higher, but then like the following week you go back to the 150. So like, are you returning back to what you've been averaging the previous couple of weeks? This technically takes about a week to 2 weeks usually to return to baseline, depending on how you are affected from the foods that you are consuming. But then even monitoring, like, are you having like higher and higher spikes? Are you having new drops, or are you dropping back to that baseline? So those are a couple things that can help when it comes to water retention. But there is also the possibility that you're gaining fat.
Yep. And so this is one of those things where you really have to just be honest with yourself when it comes to guesstimating your journey moving forward, all those things, because it is really easy at this point in your journey, any point in your journey, like, oh well, it's water retention, or I'm probably gaining strength, or I know that muscle weighs more than fat, so if my weight is climbing, I'm just getting stronger, and like all of those things feel really good, but when you're like stepping on the scale, when you're putting your clothes on, when you're looking yourself in the mirror, if you're actually gaining strength, if you probably have a little bit of water retention, or if maybe your guesstimations are a little bit off and the numbers on your tracker may not be matching what it is that you're eating. So there's the potential that you are starting to gain a little bit of unnecessary or unwanted fat. And like she said, a lot of times a good indicator of that is like if every week your weight is continuing to climb, it may be time to take a look and reassess the approach if you're not okay with how things are moving forward.
Yeah. And so one really big expectation is expecting the same results while changing your way of measuring is completely unrealistic. So like if you think about it, when you were starting this journey, you were measuring and tracking, using a food scale. Now, as you start to guesstimate, guess what? You're starting to use your eyeballs.
Yeah,
right?
This is the inverse of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Yeah.
Now you're doing something different and you're expecting the same results. It's like neither one of those two equations add up, right? Because people say like, oh, like definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The same thing would be true about like, all right, maybe it's insane to do different things and expect the same results.
Yeah. And so like there's nothing wrong with this. It's just a thing to be aware, right? But if you are not happy with how it's going, then there's a couple of factors that you can evaluate. And when we say how it's going, it's like, hey, I've been guesstimating, like I'm not really feeling confident in how I'm feeling or how I'm looking. So like, what are some things that I could do to make it so that I feel more confident with what it is?
Yeah.
Well,
And with all this, it's like do your best to take a look at the entire picture, right? Because sometimes, especially for us, it's like, oh, like I really like when I'm this lean, but I feel like I'm always eating at the house, or I have to have everything on the scale. I'm a little bit dialed in a different way, right? Whereas like, all right, with a little bit more guesstimation, some luxuries, some freedoms, I retain a little bit more body fat, but I really like this whole balance of things where it's I am
life looks different.
yeah, and so it's like when you're looking at this and you're taking a look at the approach, it's like, all right, look at all of the things, not just the scale and not just how your clothes are fitting,
Mhm.
but how are you feeling with socialization, with life, with going out, with some of the luxuries or freedoms or all of those things, because now those are a part of the equation.
Yep. So either you can change your approach or you can change your expectations. And this is the huge portion, which she just talked about, is the expectations of things. And so changing your expectations, well, like what is your current focus? Like you're currently inside of phase 4 freedom, and you are focused on learning how to be able to guesstimate foods without the facts, how to be able to eat foods that maybe you don't allow yourself to eat often, but you would like to be able to eat more often. And so with that, the focus would be, I'm learning the skill of guesstimating. Yes, there is the possibility that I might gain a little extra fat, but guess what? You also have the skill to be able to shred that fat.
Yep.
And or you can change the way in which you are approaching and doing your guesstimations, which we'll cover here in just a moment. But like, let's say like you are currently focused on fat loss. Like, can you still guesstimate foods? Totally, for
Absolutely.
sure. We've had plenty of people, go and guesstimate during their fat loss phase. And sometimes they're like, well, my guesstimations are not going very well. And then sometimes they're like, oh, I did pretty good and I'm still, dropping fat. And so then asking yourself in that expectation of like, are you okay with a slower fat loss? If you're doing learning a new skill of guesstimating, like can you do a mixture of things? But it's really just being aware and setting those proper expectations of like, what is the focus and what are you looking to achieve in the long run?
Yep. But as you do this, like with learning, like the only way you're going to get better is with practice. And so sometimes it's like, all right, like, am I okay with learning a little bit faster or learning a little bit slower? Like if this is something that you're going to pursue, you're going to have to learn it at some point. And part of the learning is making guesstimations and having misses. And so
Yep.
it's like if you do guess and you're off on higher or lower or whatever, that means you're doing it right because that is a part of the journey.
Yep. And so the other portion is like changing your approach. All right. So a couple factors to evaluate, like with your guesstimations, would be like the accuracy of your guesstimations. Like, how can you prove the accuracy, the variety, the frequency at which you're guesstimating, and your current calorie target. And so when it comes to changing your approach with accuracy, like, how can you increase your accuracy? How can you increase your precision with what it is that you're guesstimating? Well, so for instance, like, are you just picking, you're going through MyFitnessPal and you pick something that you're gonna go for a burger and you choose the 500 calorie burger, and it's a half-pound burger that has avocado, bacon, cheese, and fried pickles or whatever. And you're like, huh, it's 500 calories. Like, is that it's
Or
like,
or even if it's just like, hey, like you have a go-to burger entry that you use all the time and you go out and your burger looks different every time. It's like you're probably not being very accurate if you picked a, McDonald's double
yeah,
cheeseburger and you're going to Islands, then you're going to Red
yeah,
Robin, then you're going to this place or that place. It's like, yeah, it sounds good, but it's just kind of a placeholder. And same thing if you're someone that like, oh, like I like to have a beer. And it's like, all right, like one beer. But then like sometimes your beer is 8%, sometimes it's 4%. You're just always using the same beer entry. It's like, oh, like you could probably do something to improve your accuracy where it's like, all right, like each burger does look a little bit different. So when I am going to input this burger, I'm going to do my best to get to as close to what I actually ate versus just typing in burger and the first thing that pops up
Yep.
is a double Whopper, and you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
cool. I didn't have any cheese, seems close enough,
Yep.
and then you just stick with it. So
Yeah.
it's like being honest with yourself, and making sure that whatever you're entering at this moment is as close based on your skill set to what it is that you're actually eating.
Yeah, and then even like adding a couple extra calories. So if you're like, oh, I tend to like be under on my guesstimations often, like, oh, or you're just worried, like, let's say you go to a place that has nutrition facts and you're like, well, I don't know, this chef might be added some extra butter because I like to butter him up. So you know, add 100 to 200 calories of butter into your entry. Like that is something that is also a
But
possibility.
asking the restaurant, calling them ahead,
Yep.
talking to the server. One of the things that we like to do is when we're in the grocery store, if we see something that jumps out, it's like, oh, this actually looks like something we've had at a restaurant.
Yep.
Because in a grocery store, most of the time they have the nutrition facts on the back. I know we've talked about it in previous lessons, but like that's one of the ways we found out or helped to improve the accuracy of like a beef rib. Because like it's like, all right, cool. They have them freeze dried or like shrink wrapped at the store. It's like, oh, cool. This is fantastic. We can use this for information. So like the accuracy can be increased in your day-to-day life as you move around, as long as you're aware.
Yep. Variety, decreasing the variety of foods that you're eating with guesstimations and sticking to a similar food each week. So he kind of had mentioned this with regards to like a burger, like rather than maybe like, okay, every single week I'm eating Chinese and pizza, and then the following week I'm gonna do like Indian and I don't know, brunch or whatever. You have like all these different cuisines, all these different types of foods, and so it can be a lot of variety. And depending on how wide of a gap these guesstimations can be a very wide gap when it comes to your calories. And so rather having like such variety, you could try like, you know what, I just love going out and getting a burger. And I'm going to eat this burger at this place. I'm going to try this burger at this place. And you're going to basically eat similar burgers at different places or eat the same damn burger at the same place because there are people that are creatures of habit that do enjoy that.
For sure. And it's just like thinking about like this is a skill, just like any skill. If you think about like right. And so like guesstimating is a skill in itself, but each dish has its own skill as well. So that would be like cooking is a skill, but cooking chicken is very different than cooking steak. It's very different than cooking a pizza, right?
Yep.
And so like you may, if you're trying to learn how to cook everything at once, it may take you a long time to master everything or anything. And it can feel frustrating. So in this situation, like cooking, it's like, all right, I'm going to master going out and guesstimating a burger. So I'm going to stick with a burger for a little while. Just like if I were to make a burger at the house, it's going to take me a while to nail the perfect one. So I'm going to try it a bunch of times.
Yep.
And so it's like, and that it's like simplifying the variety of things that you're guesstimating will help you get the skill faster because there's less variables.
Yep. And it helps you establish a little bit more of a baseline for yourself.
No, it's all about that base.
Yep, that base, no trouble. Frequency, decreasing the amount that you are guesstimating or eating out. So like if you are a person who's literally eating out 5 times a week, 3 times a day, like whatever that is, like the more that you guesstimate, the more like that it is a guess. It really is. And so unless you're like every single day, once again, going and eating the same thing, like I go to Chipotle and I always get this. This is what I always do. Then it built a baseline. But if you go to Chick-fil-A, to Chipotle, to wherever, then you have a lot of different guesstimations, which allows for a lot of variety when it comes to the calories. And so you could always, rather than going out 5 times a week, maybe try 2 to 3 times a week. But this is all just, it just depends on what it is that you're looking to achieve. And then another one that can help is altering your target. And so for instance, like if you are in a maintenance phase and maintaining calories, then what you could do is if you're shooting, for example, like maybe you're shooting for like 2,300 calories weekly average, then decreasing it to 2,000 calories weekly average, especially if you tend to not be the best at guesstimating quite yet, because then this gives you a little bit of flexibility within your intake if you are constantly like underestimating foods and gives you some wiggle room.
Yeah, so it just allows for potential like margin of error while you're learning.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I'm learning this new thing. So it would be, once again, if we're to reference a different type of learning, it would be like, oh, I'm learning how to bowl, right? The margin would be the bumpers that go up on the side. So it's like, all right, cool. While I'm learning, I'll give myself the bumpers that go up on the side, so that way I can still make it to the end of the lane without completely throwing my ball in the gutter.
Yep. But once again, there is no right or wrong answer with this. It's up to you. And it's up to you with regards to what it is that you want to achieve. What are you focusing on? What are you looking to get out of this, right?
Yep.
And so make sure that you are being patient with yourself, because as we've mentioned, it is a skill. It takes time to develop, as with any of the skills that you've learned throughout this entire program. Be kind to yourself and actually practice the skill, because that is where the mastery comes into play.
Yep.
But in conclusion, guesstimating is an educated guess. It's an educated logical guess of how many calories are in the food that you hold. And it can help increase your food freedom by helping you integrate foods without the facts, so that you can identify if you want to integrate them, how often you want to integrate them, and how much you want to consume of it, right? But do make sure that you are managing your expectations, because while it may look amazing inside of the lifestyle tracker, how are you actually looking and feeling in comparison to that? But as with anything, like, if you're not happy, guess what? Like, you can change it. You can always change it. You're not stuck with anything except your genetics. But be kind and patient with yourself and practice the skill. But if you have questions, submit a burning question or apply for a breakthrough session.